Hello, economics students. This is Mr. Stark, your friendly and faithful economics teacher here. I'm going to be narrating the end of this PowerPoint on Market Structures Standard 3. So hopefully you're following along in your notes, the note packets that you should already have. If not, I highly suggest you take some of these notes down on your own paper. We are going to start with regulations. If you recall, we finished talking about Rockefeller, his monopolies, some of the tactics he used to get those monopolies before we had our extended break. And now we're going to talk a little bit about what has happened in our government, what different agencies and regulations have been put in place so Rockefeller, or the ghost of Rockefeller, never comes back and no other businesses ever have the power or monopoly that he had. So start with the definition of regulation, which is in your vocabulary list. Regulation is the controlling business behavior through a set of rules or laws. So basically, they're rules that the government puts out to make sure businesses play by the rules. So in a sense, the government's kind of like the referee, and the regulations are the rules of the game, and the government now has the ability to throw penalty flags if a business breaks the rules. And we'll be taking a look at some of those agencies that throw the penalty flags here in just a moment. A merger is basically the joining of two firms. You oftentimes hear about large ones, such as Disney and Pixar merged into one, but there are many mergers that happen every single year, such as Citicorp and Travelers became Citigroup, Exxon and Mobil, two oil companies became Exxon Mobil. A trust is something that you probably heard from the Rockefeller documentary, and that basically is another term for basically a monopoly, a way to reduce competition by joining together into really one company, although on paper it looks like the companies are still independent, but in practice they are not. And then finally, antitrust legislation are the laws that were put into place starting with the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 that give the government the power to act as the referees and to penalize the government, or I'm sorry, penalize the companies either through large fines or through actually breaking them up into pieces like Standard Oil was in 1911. Today, the main agency that's responsible for making sure monopolies don't form is called the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC. If you want to merge with another company, you have to ask permission by the FTC, and it's usually a pretty long, pretty laborious, pretty expensive process. You have to fill out a lot of paperwork, they have to give official approval. They don't always give approval. As you can see in the bottom right hand corner of this slide, AT&T and T-Mobile have been trying for years to merge unsuccessfully. The FTC thought that would take away some competition in the market, but in some cases, you can see where my arrow is, they do allow mergers because it makes more efficiency and lower operating costs, which means lower costs for consumers. But again, the main factor of a market economy that the FTC prizes above all else is competition. So here are some of the agencies, by no means all, but just a few of them, that are responsible for protecting us as consumers. For example, you have the Federal Trade Commission, which we've talked about. They also talk about, and they also prevent deceptive advertising. So for example, when Nutella, which used to be able to call themselves the healthy after-school treat, the FTC decided that that was not fair advertising because Nutella, with its multi-grams of sugar, is not a healthy after-school treat. Thus, Nutella can no longer call themselves that. The Food and Drug Administration deals with, as it says, unsafe foods and drugs. They make sure prescription drug companies follow the rules, do rigorous, fair, and neutral tests on their drugs. They make sure that food companies put correct and updated and accurate nutrition labels. They also deal with cosmetics. Cosmetics have a number of different materials, from oil to charcoal to lots of others that the FDA monitors to make sure it's safe for humans to put on their skin. The Federal Communications Commission basically deals with radio, TV, cable, telephone services. They make sure TV stations are following the rules for appropriate content, make sure that telemarketers can't call you in certain hours if you're on the no-call list. The Securities and Exchange Commission basically deal with the stock market. They make sure that companies are telling their investors the truth in order to get them to invest in their company. They make sure that unfair information isn't given to certain people, which the rest of the population doesn't have, which might give them a tip on what companies are going to be exploding and which companies are going to be going down the drain soon. That's called insider trading, and that is illegal if you have inside information that the rest of the public is not privy to. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, deals with just that, protecting the law or protecting the environment against pollution, air, water, lots of other different types. And the Consumer Product Safety Commission, they basically deal with product safety that is not food, drug, or cosmetics. So they deal with recalls on cars when there's a defective car part, or consumer products such as baby cribs that are dangerous, such as a certain crib years ago that was a foldable wooden frame crib. Unfortunately, setting the infant in the crib in a certain way caused it to trigger the folding mechanism, and unfortunately several infants were killed before the CPSC pulled it off the market. So now on this slide, you need to match the different agencies with the different situation, preferably on your own sheet of paper. This is on your Bell worksheet that I have attached in the instructions in the hyperlink, and there's also an answer guide. I do ask that you try your best to answer these first and then look at the answer key to see if you got it right. And the critical thinking question, all of the agencies I just mentioned are government agencies, large government involvement in the economy, but in a pure market economy, very little, if any, government involvement in the economy. If someone were a pure market economist, what would they say would protect consumers without these government agencies? So without these government agencies, how would they say consumers are protected? Or what would happen simply through competition, supply and demand, and the free hand of the economy, according to pure market economists? We come to deregulation, which basically there are times in our government when they have taken away some of the rules for businesses, such as in 1978, airlines were deregulated. They took away a lot of the rules. The pros, there's always pros and cons. Remember, there's always trade-offs. The pros is a lot of new airlines entered, which meant more competition, more efficiency, more jobs. Prices dropped, more people flying. The cons, on the other hand, quality decreased because the government wasn't monitoring some of the flight, I guess, amenities you would say, such as food. Food went down in quality. Airports were overcrowded with lots of more flyers, and because labor unions lost some of their power through this, a lot of airline employees got lower benefits, more hours, less say in their contracts. In general, and this is only in general, Republicans favor deregulation, so taking away some of the rules on businesses so they are more free to operate by the free hand of the economy and become more prosperous and be able to grow. On the other hand, Democrats are more skeptical of that and believe that more regulations are needed in order to keep businesses from becoming monopolies or unfairly exploiting their workers or consumers. However, I want to emphasize both Republicans and Democrats are pro-business, but they both have different visions about what businesses can and should do with their freedoms. And we come to the three types of business organizations, basically the three ways that businesses set themselves up. We have sole proprietorship, partnership, and corporations. A sole proprietorship is just that, owned by one person. Again, trade-offs, goods and bads. It's easy to open or close. If you want to open it, you get some money, you start it. If you want to close it, you just close shop. The government really doesn't care much about you because you don't pay a whole lot in taxes, and you have freedom and control of your business. You are the sole owner operator. You keep the profits, but on the disadvantages, if the government or if the economy goes south and your business doesn't succeed, you are responsible for the loans that you still have to pay back or the employees that you owe back pay. You have very limited funds because it's just you, so you have to beg, borrow, have it loaned to you, or use your life savings. And typically, these businesses do not last more than 5 years. This is the 3 out of 4 businesses that typically fail within 5 years. A lot of them are sole proprietorships, and they have unlimited liability, which means they have legal responsibility for their business. So if one of their products is defective, hurts people, or they go bankrupt, the owner themselves, not their co-owners, not anybody else, is responsible for paying back the debts and for any damage that is done, which is a very scary thought if you think of it. Partnerships is the second, and it's usually a few people who own, 2 or more is the definition. Advantages, again, easy to open and close because they're usually pretty small and simple. There's not a whole lot of government regulations because, again, they don't make a lot of money, so they don't pay a ton of taxes. They have access to more resources because there's more people owning it, more networks of people to get money from. They can make decisions together, which means they're able to specialize on their skills. Maybe one partner's better with the consumers, and maybe the other partner's better with the bookkeeping or the accounting or the advertising. Disadvantages, again, those partners have unlimited liability. And when there's more than one person involving a business and there's money involved, there's always the potential for conflict. Most partnerships dissolve because of conflicts about where they believe the company should go. And these also typically have a limited life, not quite as limited as sole proprietorships, but they still typically don't last longer than 10 years. And finally, we come to corporations, the big businesses, the ones who offer pieces of their company, thousands or even millions of pieces of their company in pieces that are called shares or individual stock. And anyone over the age of 18 can buy stock in the company if they have the money for it. And the advantages of this, you have lots of money, lots of people investing, assuming it's a good-looking business. You have professional managers who you hire to do the different specializations, like you have a chief financial officer, you have a chief executive officer, you have a chief legal officer, all who specialize in a certain area. They have limited liability, so if you own stock in a company, and let's say that company makes a bad product that hurts people and they get sued, as a stockholder, you are not responsible in that lawsuit. You are just a stockholder. The worst that could happen is if the company you're invested in goes bankrupt, the stock that you own becomes worthless and you lose the money you invested in it. And typically these companies have long lives. Some of them have been around since the mid-19th century, such as Wells Fargo. Disadvantages, it's hard to start up. You need a lot of money and you need a lot of time, and you need a lot of lawyers to start them up, and closing down is also very laborious. As I told you before, Toys R Us declared bankruptcy years ago. They just closed their doors about a year ago, so it takes a long time to stop the train of a corporation. They're heavily regulated. These are the ones the government looks at carefully to make sure they're paying their taxes, to make sure they're following the rules. They're taxed in 2 ways, one of which they're taxed on their profits, and they're also taxed, I believe, on their revenue, which means they're taxed twice. And we'll talk more about that in the next standard when we talk about taxes in a few weeks. And because they offer large pieces of their company to investors, they could possibly lose control if a certain investor or investors are able to buy more stock than they have. For example, Bill Gates, the majority owner of Microsoft, only owns, or he's not the majority owner, he's the plurality owner. He owns more stock than anyone else, but he only owns 3 to 4% of the Microsoft stock. So if someone could buy more than him, they would become the head of Microsoft. And we're going to skip this activity and move towards the 3 ways businesses pay the bills. They are retained earnings, so basically the money they make, they put it back in the company. Like our friend Mr. Todd, the money he made from his pies the year he appeared on Shark Tank, he puts it back in the company to grow it, to make more pies, to hire more workers. Second one, issue stock. If you're big enough, if your company is worth enough, you can chop it up into pieces legally and offer pieces in the form of stock to investors. And finally, good old-fashioned borrowing. Banks lend money to businesses just like people. But just like any loan, like borrowing money, you have to pay them the amount back plus interest. That interest can be anywhere from 1 digit to double digits, depending on the risk of your business. There are 3 types of business organizations that are not driven by profit. Labor unions, which are usually you have to pay to belong to one, but they don't run for profit. They're the ones that make sure their employees have fair hours, better working conditions, fair wages. They negotiate contracts for them. These came to power through the progressive movement of the early 20th century, and their power has kind of waxed and waned throughout the 20th and 21st century. You have non-for-profits, which I know you've heard of because Heron High School is a non-for-profit. The Salvation Army, the Red Cross, many of these are organizations that exist for a social or ethical cause, such as Wheeler Mission, and there's thousands of others. And then there's co-ops or cooperatives. These basically exist for the shared benefit of the owners, who are also customers. For example, a group of farmers in Boone County, northwest of Marion County, form a co-op by putting all of their money into a cooperative account, which is like a bank account. So they're the owners of it, but they're also the only ones that can take money out of it because they are the owners and the customers. You can't join a co-op or take money out of the co-op account unless you are a part of it and have put money into it. And finally, this is it, the 2 types of competition, the way businesses compete against each other. You have price competition, so basically buy our product because it's cheaper than the other. A big example of this is generic, so buy Sam's Club soda because it's cheaper than Pepsi and Coke. Or, buy Equate brand toothpaste because it's cheaper than Crest. All other competition or advertising is non-price. So when you have celebrities endorse it, such as Shakira endorsing Pepsi, the message is, be like Shakira, drink Pepsi, even though it's more expensive than the generics. You have the cute polar bears on Coca-Cola. If you drink Coke, then you're friends with cute roly-poly polar bears who are actually very vicious creatures. And then you have free gifts. When I was a kid, they'd have free toys inside cereal boxes. I don't know if that's still a thing, but that was a reason to buy the more expensive cereal, even though you had a 10-cent toy inside. But any kind of celebrity endorsement, whether it's a celebrity who's like on a sports star, or a celebrity doctor such as Dr. Oz, or any other you have people in white coats with stethoscopes who are actually not doctors. You read the fine print, but they say something's healthy. That's all non-price competition. So for example, Heinz ketchup, so natural that it literally grows from the ground, bottle and all. Number 2, wear this cologne and you look, smell, and sound like Matthew McConaughey, even with his southern twang. And finally, you buy Papa John's pizza and you're Peyton Manning's buddy. So again, non-price competition uses other things such as the power of celebrity to try and sell their product. And that is it. You will be doing a vocab quiz next class. It's practice for practice points. It's in the form of a Google form. I hope this PowerPoint helped you. And my office hours via Google Meet will be every day from 1 to 2 o'clock, so you can hook up and talk to me that way. or you can feel free to email me at any time. I'll be monitoring my emails. I hope you all are staying safe, making wise decisions, getting your work done, because it's absolutely critical to do your e-learning if we want to be able to count these days as legitimate e-learning days. And I hope you're getting some rest as well. I look forward to seeing you all, and I will talk to you later. Mr. Stark, out.